Your story changed you. Now let it change the lives of others. This is a Candy Factory Mini. So you want to write a book? With Suzette Mullen.
Join me as we follow the development of a nonfiction book from idea to completion. We'll explore the creative process as well as the nuts and bolts of pitching and publication. Get a behind-the-scenes look of my book coaching process, as well as clear takeaways and nuggets of wisdom. Let me walk alongside you as you learn to tell your story. Hello, I'm Suzette Mullen, book coach, nonfiction writer, and your host. Welcome to this episode of So You Want to Write a Book. My goal is to break down the challenging process of finding and getting clear on your story so you can finally take action on the book that's been rattling around your head or tugging at your heart. And even if you never plan to write a book, I'll share tips that will help you become a more informed reader and a more effective writer in your work life. If you have questions, I welcome them. Just leave them in the chat. So go ahead and grab a pen and paper or your phone or laptop to jot down some notes, and let's get started. Last time, we talked about working titles, why they're important, and how to choose one for your book, even if you haven't written a single word of your draft. This week, we're talking structure. Specifically, we're looking at how to structure a self-help, personal development, or business development book. And this category of books is collectively known as prescriptive nonfiction. This is where the idea or the concept takes center stage in the book. Unlike in memoir or other narrative nonfiction, where the story takes center stage. And don't worry, if you're writing memoir, we'll get back to that in the next episode. We'll talk about memoir structure then. Structure is intimidating, and it's often the number one thing that trips up first-time authors. And I've got good news for you. In a minute, I'm going to share 2 of my favorite tips that will help you move from flummoxed to focused. But before I do that, let's just be clear on what we mean when we say structure. It's pretty simple. Structure is how you choose to organize the content you want to communicate in your book. Will your book be divided into parts? Will there be chapters? And if so, how many chapters? And what about those chapters? How will they be organized? Will you have stories? Will you have exercises? It really depends. Those are the choices that you're going to be making. So that's structure, plain and simple. Let's move on to our tips. Tip number 1, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's right. You don't have to come up with some wildly creative, avant-garde way to structure your nonfiction book. Your reader isn't coming to you for your originality when you're writing a nonfiction book. She's coming to you because she has a problem and she hopes your book can solve that problem. And in the vast majority of cases, your reader would like that information delivered in a logical and digestible manner. So how do you do that? Well, my recommendation is you start with books that you already own that feel close to the type of book you're planning to write. You should own some of these books. You need to be familiar with the genre and category of book that you're planning to write. So go ahead to your bookcase, pull some of those books off your bookshelf, and start studying their table of contents. Note what appeals to you and what doesn't. I recommend you start a list where you're jotting down your own preferences, your own do's and don'ts for your future table of contents. Now, you can do the same kind of research online on Amazon or another online retailer. That look inside feature gives you a peek into thousands of table of contents. So I want to walk you through this exercise of table of content checking with 2 prescriptive nonfiction books that couldn't be any more different from each other. So the first book I want to talk to you about is called How to Break Up with Your Phone by Catherine Price. So I bought this book a few years ago when I thought I needed to spend less time on my phone. And unfortunately, I still need to spend less time on my phone, but that's another story for another day. So How to Break Up with Your Phone is a classic how-to or self-help book. So I'm going to take you inside the table of contents and we'll see together what we can learn from the structure. So after some opening material, she's got a cute open letter to my phone and an introduction where the author tells us why she decided to write the book. This book is simple. It's divided into 2 parts. Part 1 is the wake up. This part simply describes the problem at hand. There are 10 chapters in part 1. And just by reading the chapter titles, you have a really good idea of what to expect in this book. So I'm going to read them for you quickly, and you can check out this yourself on Amazon at a later date. So chapter 1, our phones are designed to addict us. Chapter 2, putting the dope in dopamine. Chapter 3, the tricks of the trade. Chapter 4, why social media sucks. Chapter 5, the truth about multitasking. Chapter 6, your phone is changing your brain. Chapter 7, your phone is killing your attention span. Chapter 8, your phone messes with your memory. Chapter 9, stress, sleep, and satisfaction. And Chapter 10, how to take back your life. Phew. Well, you have a good idea of what to expect, and you either are dying to pick up this book or it's the last thing you want to do. Part 2 is the solution to the problem she's presented in part 1. And it's simply a 4-week plan to build a healthier relationship with your phone. So if your book idea falls under a how-to or fairly straightforward problem that you have a solution to, check out the structure of this book or other similar self-help how-to books and just consider modeling yours similarly. And now for a prescriptive nonfiction book that is completely different. This is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love fame. The subtitle of Big Magic is Creative Living Beyond Fear. And I'd say this book is less organized around a problem and a solution, and it's more organized around a big idea. What does creative living look like? And how can we live creatively even when we're afraid? So if you look inside the table of contents of Big Magic, you can go on Amazon and do that later. You're going to see a very different looking table of contents than the one that we saw in Break Up with Your Phone. There are 6 parts in this table of contents and no chapters at all. Each part is a big idea in and of itself. Courage, enchantment, permission, persistence, trust, and divinity. So Liz Gilbert structured her book on creativity in a very creative, organic way, which makes sense given the subject matter. But I don't want you to be fooled by the woo-woo structure. She hasn't just thrown in these parts randomly. There's a quiet logic and progression to her book. So if your book idea is more of a reflection or meditation on a big idea, rather than a straightforward how-to or self-help book, you might want to check out Big Magic and see what you can learn from Liz Gilbert's structure in this book. So that brings me to our second and final tip on structure for today. This is called the outcome outline. Now, the outcome outline is the brainchild of book coach Jenny Nash, who is the founder and CEO of Author Accelerator, which is the nation's #1 book coaching certification training program and community. And I happen to be a proud member of it, and I'm certified as a book coach through Author Accelerator. I'm going to be digging deeper into the outcome outline in a future episode. But right now, I just want to give you an overview, and I want to show you how this tool can help you structure your nonfiction book. So tip number 2 is the outcome outline. This is simply a table that you can create as a Word document or whatever document you like to use. It has 3 columns, and then it has as many rows as you have chapters. For each chapter, you're going to answer these 3 questions. Number 1, what's the point of the chapter? Why is it here? Number 2, what will the reader know, feel, or do by the end of the chapter? In other words, how is the reader changed by having read this information in the chapter? And number 3, how is this chapter connected to the next one? What's the idea that moves the reader from this chapter to the next? Now, this tool is incredibly effective in helping you structure your book. And fair warning, it's time intensive and it can be pretty challenging to use. I've done it, and I've also coached lots of writers using it. But trust me, using the outcome outline is much less challenging and time consuming than spinning your wheels and writing in circles, or the worst alternative, not writing at all. The outcome outline forces you to think of your book as an argument for or against something, which does 2 important things. First, it helps you weed out material that doesn't need to be there. So if you've just got something that's just really interesting to you, but it doesn't contribute to the argument you're making in your nonfiction book, it has to come out, and you see that in the outcome outline. Or maybe you can find another way to present that material in a way that does contribute to your argument. And number 2, the outcome outline forces you to create a logical progression for your material. So you have all these ideas for your chapters, whether it's a how-to book or a big idea book, but you still need to organize these ideas in a logical progression. So the questions in the outcome outline, particularly that 3rd set of questions I mentioned, how is this chapter connected to the next one? And what's the idea that moves the reader from this chapter to the next? That requires you to make the logical connections, to create the necessary progression that will help your reader solve her problem or understand a big idea in a new way. So I want to wrap us up for today. And when you're tackling your structure challenge for your prescriptive nonfiction book, remember, prescriptive nonfiction, that's self-help, how-to, personal or business development. Virtually any nonfiction category that is idea-based, not story-based, like memoir. The first thing you should do is do your research. Study table of contents examples in your same category. Learn from these and adapt them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And number 2, try your hand at the outcome outline. For each chapter, ask yourself, why is the chapter there? Does it have to be there? What does the reader learn in the chapter? And how does the idea in one chapter connect to the idea in the next chapter? As promised, I'll be digging more into this outcome outline in a future episode. So if this feels daunting or a little confusing right now, you'll have another chance. And also, if you have questions about the outcome outline in the interim, just go ahead and drop me an email at hello@yourstoryfinder.com, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. As always, I invite you to sign up at yourstoryfinder.com for my weekly newsletter. It's chock full of tips to help writers get started, get unstuck, and get their stories out into the world. Next time, we'll be talking about structure again, but this time, how to structure your memoir. I look forward to seeing you then. And in the meantime, happy reading and writing. So You Want to Write a Book is part of the Candy Factory mini-series and is a proud member of the Candy Factory Collective. You can find the show streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And you can subscribe to the audio version anywhere you get your podcasts.
Over the past 8 years, Suzette has been on a mission to help writers clear the fog and cut through the overwhelm so they can move their ideas out of their head and onto the page.
Her later in life coming out journey and her professional experience as an author, accelerator, certified book coach, and Dare to Lead trained professional, as well as her time at Harvard Law School, Wellesley College, and Columbia Theological Seminary, have given her a unique perspective, as well as many of her own stories to tell.
When she's not writing or coaching other writers, Suzette can be found on her yoga mat,
advocating for the Lancaster LGBTQ+ coalition,
or hanging out with her partner, Wendy, and their rescue pup, Lucy.
Visit yourstoryfinder.com to learn more about Suzette and her life story, as well as her writing coach offerings.
Life's too short to stay stuck, so why not write that book?
So You Want to Write a Book is produced by the Candy Factory Collective at the Candy Factory Co-working Campus in Lancaster, PA.
Production support by Anna Tran. Administrative support by Ann Kirby, Ariana Henderson, Krisha Marcel, Jason Mundock, and Robert Diggs. Notes and links can be found on the show post at our website, candyfactorycollective.com. Candy Factory.
Collective.